of the Institute of Race Relations in South Africa. The Institute is one of the oldest liberal institutions in South Africa, founded in 1929, and has played a critical role in the advancement of South Africa through apartheid and current day. Frans also directs the Center for Risk Analysis, which is a Johannesburg-based strategic intelligence think tank that has also advised a great number of corporations, government and government agencies around the world on South Africa's long-term economic, social, political, and different policy options. Frans obtained his PhD in scenario planning and also studied at St. John's College in Houghton. Last but certainly not the least is Mr. Louw, who is well known to many South Africans and to our community, the freedom promoting community in Africa and around the world. Louw is the co-founder and the chief executive officer currently of the Free Market Foundation in South Africa. Louw helped co-found the Free Market Foundation back in 1975 and was really instrumental in pushing for the end of apartheid, as well as the post-apartheid South Africa. He's a well-respected intellectual and author, speaker, and policy advisor. He has been regularly featured on international media. He was one of those who addressed the US Congress during hearings on apartheid, and has also addressed the United Nations on issues on freedom. So we do have a very, very distinguished group of speakers with organizations that are very young to organizations like the Institute of Race Relations in South Africa that is at least 90 years old. So this will be a very, very diverse conversation. So to start up, I will start with Belinder. You just recently, founded Yahoo. Can you give us a little brief introduction as to what Yahoo is all about? What prompted you and your colleagues to go about forming Yahoo, and some of the issues that you faced with Yahoo currently?
I'd like to say thank you so much for having me here. Thank you so much to Atlas Network and Imani Ghana for putting this together. So Yahoo, in short, was just inspired by an event that took place in Nairobi in October 2017. It was called Young Scholars Colloquia. It was organized by the East Africa Policy Research Center in Nairobi in collaboration with the Students for Liberty. So basically, it was meant to bring young people together to discuss the ideas of liberty. So after the event, I spoke with my friend from Ghana, Peter Bismarck, and Nathaniel Domina, and I was just sharing with them the fact that I'm very passionate about entrepreneurship, and I am very libertarian as well. So I was looking for a project that could be able to incorporate a bit of both. Like get students to a forum to discuss ideas of liberty, but also reach out to the business community to discuss market-based economics, and also create forums where people could learn how to effectively argue for liberty. So that's how Yahoo came about. So we started by having Ilapi Ghana organized a debate at 2 universities in Ghana in the same year. And after that, we had like a permanent forum for students to debate on libertarian ideas. So after that, we decided to create like a business forum, which was organized by Yahoo, just to bring young people together to discuss business and some of the challenges that we face as young Africans when you're trying to start and run a business in any part of Africa. So we came up with various programs, one of which is Link Me, which is a program.
I'm not sure if Belinder is frozen. I think we'll have to come back with when Belinder joins us. I'll move to Lanre. Lanre, you are based in Ibadan, and you know you lead. You are the executive director of Ominira initiative, which is also a young initiative. Can you start by giving us a little bit overview as to the work of Ominira and the founding of it?
Thank you, Dr. Denis. Ominira Initiative is an independent think tank. We started about a year or two ago here in Nigeria. And our mission, as you rightly said earlier, is to research and advance solutions to Africa's socio-economic issues. And we have a number of activities. We do that through a number of activities. We have Ominira TV, where we create online videos and documentaries to promote the ideas of freedom. And then we have other projects. We also do article publications and periodical policy briefs. We also have plans to organize events that will help us strategically engage stakeholders in the policy arena. We started this in 2018 with Ominira TV, which is the media project of Ominira Initiative today. And our plan is to engage stakeholders, engage policy, and engage stakeholders in the policy arena so that we can push forward solutions to some of the problems that we are faced with in our society today.
So, Lanre, just to follow up on that, how has Ominira TV Ominira initiative been received, and what are some of the challenges that you've encountered during this short time that you've engaged on this?
Okay, so some of the problems that we faced while starting up has been, one of it is the fact that the environment, the environment is still hostile to donations, first off. And even in Nigeria, I remember when we were trying to legally register as a policy think tank here in Nigeria, it took almost a year to get it done because of processes that we had to go through, the expense and all of that. So we've had to face the challenge of raising funds. We've had to face the challenge of getting people who understand our philosophical meaning. And we're still facing some challenges that we hope to deal with as we grow.
Yeah, so one more thing before I come to Frans, one more thing regarding the issue of staffing and team building. And so have you had trouble with that? Some folks tend to, young organizations tend to face that challenge.
Yes, we do. We currently have 2 full-time members, staff member, and 4 part-time. But what we've seen is that even when we need people, it's either we do not have enough funds to get the best of them, or we do not get the people that we find do not understand the philosophy that we are promoting. So that presents a challenge, but we've been dealing with it because we have the network that we get to reach out to, the ESFL, the Liberty Network. It's always our first go-to when we're looking for people to work with.
No, thank you very much for that. Frans, let me come to you. You run an institute that is arguably one of the oldest in South Africa and in Africa in general, and has a very, very storied history. Was really ahead of its time in promoting for free participation of all races in South Africa. Led the fight in ending apartheid. During your time so far as chief executive, what are some of the lessons that you're learning, especially from how to keep the institution at the current pace, or at least even grow the institution?
Yeah, Denis, well, good afternoon to you from my side of the world. Yeah, an old organization, and I'll start with one thing. We tend not to play up the history because there's a risk that organizations justify their present based on what happened in the past. And we're very forward-looking. Even when we are attacked, right-wing nonsense, etc., we tend not to go back into our past. It's sort of almost a badge of honor in the place that we know what we did before, but judge us on what we're doing today. And that's important. Today, it's a full-time team of about 40 staffers, and there are about 20 consultants and contracted columnists and so on who work for us. It practices battle of ideas theory. It has a purpose. Think of it, it's not a think tank, it's a factory. And what it does is it manufactures a product. And the product is always the same thing. It's an argument in favor of liberty. And we need to market that product and put it in the public domain where it will influence the thinking of people. And if you're not doing that, you're not getting your product into the market, you're not influencing thinking, then you're wasting your time. And we run the place to quite strict quantitative targets. I'd say about a third of the staff are marketing, media, public relations, and social media marketing staff now. So the balance has moved away from kind of top-class academics, although they're still there, and you've got to sell this stuff. And if you can't sell it, then you're wasting your time. We're quite good at market segmentation, so we talk to different levels of the market through different brands. So you see behind me the Center for Risk Analysis. That's a think tank in its own right. That talks to business, foreign investors, government departments and agencies. We run an online newspaper called The Daily Friend that's going great guns. It's now up to this month, we hope to be at 250,000 unique readers, over 50,000 subscribers. And we built that because the mainstream media has gatekeepers who block pro-liberty argument. So we thought, to hell with you, we'll build our own newspaper, and we're actually trying to give the mainstream in South Africa a run for its money, and it's working. It's the greatest feeling ever. It's really nice. A lot of social media marketing. If you Google Big Daddy Liberty, for example, you'll come across the most marvelous chap you've ever met, Sihle Ngobese, a senior colleague. He's head of strategic affairs with us, and he runs the YouTube channels and talk shows and the like. And I think one of the lessons in all of this is innovation. Don't be trapped. In fact, do the opposite of when you're told be nice to the donors or else you'll be bankrupt, throw the donors out. Go fund yourself. We're in about 90% self-financing now as an organization. A lot of crowdfundings work really well. Sophisticated social media marketing, delivering leads. We've got a call center we've established that brings in paying supporters for what we do. So high levels of innovation, be very bold in what you do. Don't think that because your predecessors did it in a certain way, you need to do the same thing. And eye on the prize. And the prize for us is winning the battle of ideas. And societies change only at points of crisis. But the direction of that change is determined by the group that had the greatest influence on public opinion at the moment of the crisis. So for years and years, think tanks might have the feeling you're not really making an impact, but you're laying, it was our apartheid experience, it's our experience of the 25 years of democracy. Chip away at laying the groundwork, pour those products into the market, get millions of people reading you and being exposed to your ideas, and wait. When the big crises hit, you have a good chance of being influential in determining the trajectory of a society. And I'll give it back to you, Denis.
Frans, I think you've been incredibly spot on and talking about innovations, being true to yourself, forward-looking. And one of the things you said brings back what I learned, I found out recently, which I've spent a great deal of time thinking about, and it's the whole notion that the majority is always wrong. The majority is always wrong. If you follow the majority, there would be no innovation. There will be no SpaceX. There will be, there will be no Uber. There will be the policy environment will be closed because, in fact, the majority is always wrong. So, as you said, to move forward, you got to do got to try to do what most people are not doing. So, I really appreciate that, and I'll come back to you on that to develop that further. But I want to bring in Leon right now. Leon, you spent a lot of time pretty much at the founding of the Free Market Foundation back in 1975. You were one of the co-founders. You've been there throughout. You've helped grow it to a fantastic organization that it is today. Now, I want to bring you in to give us, to contextualize, those years to what the Free Market Foundation is doing today, and some of the key lessons that you could share on younger folks trying to follow in your footsteps and to blaze their own trail.
Oh, thanks. It's technically somewhat more than 45 years. It's 50 years now. I was the sole creator, brought in other people, and I'm very proud of that fact. So I've been around a while, and we were like the Institute, like the IRR, Frans, great people, great friends, consistent, uncompromising anti-apartheid activists. It's like him, we don't spend much time ruminating about the role we played, although in our case it had some considerable significance. There are, for example, some clauses in the Constitution which are there because of us. We have differed somewhat from most think tanks in the world, which were once called Fisher Institutes, because Anthony Fisher, who founded Atlas, founded these institutes around the world, and their job was to promote classical liberalism, or what most of us now call libertarianism. And we've been doing that consistently and unambiguously. One of the ironies is that in the past, that made us in South Africa called communists, because if you opposed apartheid, you were called a communist. And we were certainly, had a lot of run-ins with the government. I personally was arrested many times, and still am, actually. I still seem to get myself arrested regularly. The Institute, the IRR, France, has very much the same philosophy and values we have. We differ maybe in some ways in that we tend to be a mix of philosophy and action. So, for example, our philosophical work might be research and publications and books at somewhat of an academic and intellectual level. Then we have sort of in between that and the activism, which I'll get to, policy work, as he says, that our job is to change the course of events. We're very clear about we want more freedom and we want less government regulation of people's lives. So how do you achieve that? You achieve that by firstly having the ideas. Secondly, you achieve that by influencing policy. So we will do submissions. One of the things we've recently started doing is socio-economic or regulatory impact assessments as a way of influencing policy. And then finally, we have activism on the ground. Now, that can be anything from having the street vendors' property, which is confiscated by the police, restored to them. It can be, I see my battery says it's going, there we go. It can be, our biggest project, by the way, by far, is what we call Kaya Lam, which means my home. And the project is busy trying to undo the worst injury of apartheid, which was to deny black people the right to own land. One of the memes which is wrong is that black people had 13% of the land, namely the so-called homelands or Bantustans. They didn't. They had none of it because in them black people were not allowed to own land. So basically in South Africa, black people were forbidden from land ownership. We are now in the process of registering ownership in the names of tens of thousands of people who occupy homes but do not own them and are now beginning to own them. And some of those are very, very moving stories. You know, an old woman who we gave a title deed to, she wept in her wheelchair at the age of 100. And when asked why by a journalist, you know, why does it matter to you when you're 100? And she said, I can at last die with dignity and I have something to leave my grandchildren. Basically everyone there had a lump in their throat and tears in their eyes. And we have many such very moving experiences. And so we work at these three levels. High level, let's call it philosophy, and things like co-publishing of the World Economic Freedom Index of the world, the one with Fraser, and then, as I say, the direct policy work, which is presentations to government departments and parliamentary committees and government officials and so on, lobbying for the right laws. And then finally, as I say, activism, which covers many grounds. For example, at the moment, we are about to bring a constitutional challenge against the laws governing residential areas or town planning or whatever one calls them in different countries, where people living in shacks and shanty towns are basically forbidden from improving their own quality of life. And this is true, by the way, in almost every country, probably every participant in this group of sessions, where for some reason poor people cannot get title to land, they cannot own their land, but they're also not allowed to build anything permanent, and their laws all say that there first has to be infrastructure and roads and services and sewers and electricity and emergency vehicle turning circles and all sorts of nonsense like that. And we are going to challenge that as a violation of the right to human dignity and try and have these town planning laws set aside. So we also bring litigation. We spread ourselves too thin. We're not as focused as the IRR. We tend to do a bit of everything. One of them is court cases, where we have successfully so far, in half a dozen cases, all of them successful, challenged laws, and we are going to be shortly launching another. So we work in various areas. We fund ourselves in two ways. One is what we call project funding, which is where we do work for companies that have an interest against government intervention. In other words, their corporate interest and our philosophy coincide. We do that on quite a big scale. And then institutional funding, which we're not particularly good at. And I must say the IRR is much better at getting funding of the general philosophical work. So that's it. We've worked to a large extent internationally. You mentioned our work with the US Congress and the United Nations and various others in anti-apartheid movement years. I personally was a courier. My colleague Temba Nolochungu, who was with you yesterday, he was a coordinator of the armed struggle, a so-called Marxist-Leninist revolutionary. And so we do have a history that we don't say much about, and even our good friend Frans over there might not even have known some of these things. But at the moment, like him, we are forward-looking. We are very clear that what our job is to prevent government control, increase freedom. It's very, very clear we want to be effective and efficient and make a real difference in the real world. And we believe, like the RR, we do that. And then I want to close with just a comment that Frans, my colleague, made about a crisis. A crisis is a fantastic opportunity, and the Chinese symbols for crisis is a combination of the word danger or problem and opportunity. So, for example, the COVID crisis now, the pandemic, is a fantastic opportunity where there's been a complete obliteration of civil liberty and human rights throughout the planet. For the first time, anything like that has happened in history. And this is an opportunity for us to really talk about what freedom and human rights and civil liberties and libertarianism are. So a crisis is indeed an opportunity to influence the course of events. And we are working very hard on particularly the legal and the economic impacts of the COVID-19 crisis.
Leon, thank you very much for that very, very expansive, presentation on what the Free Market Foundation is and what it has been doing. And you've well laid out the three arms of having ideas first, and then being able to influence policy. As we all learn, moving the Overton window to a point where it becomes very acceptable a policy option. And how to go about activism. And, we are going to come back to dive into how you build the organization to be able to, accomplish this. But I want to come to Belinder. Belinder, before you dropped off, you were talking about Yahoo, and I am interested in finding out, how has Yahoo been received, in the community, in Kenya, in Africans around the world, especially the young people, the younger generation, so to speak. And how are you, going about getting funding and structuring the organization for the long haul? You're muted.
Okay, I haven't muted. So I was just saying that I'm sorry for that technological hit that we had a few minutes ago that cut me off. So Yahoo it is good to note that Yahoo is actually registered in Ghana. I'm the CEO, but I'm Kenyan. I'm based in Kenya. So I run it together with my colleagues in Ghana through the various programs that I was mentioning earlier before I went off. So how Yahoo has been received? Well, I would say that this pretty much depends on your target audience and how well you are able to target your messaging to reach your target audience. So Yahoo, our target audience are students and young entrepreneurs and young professionals. So we have gotten very good feedback from young professionals and young entrepreneurs, but it's not been easy with students at all. The reason is that it's not easy to explain the word liberty to somebody who does not identify with liberty, you understand? So you have to, it was very challenging when we started, having to do our messaging in a way that young people can be able to understand market-based economics, why that is important to them. So, but through the help of Atlas Network resources, Atlas Leadership Academy and the resources that are there, we learned as leaders. And then we transferred this to our student leaders at campus and also our other leaders to be able to help us with getting out the message.
To follow up, Belinder, one of the main struggles that we tend to see is that it becomes difficult to build the core of the organization to be able to deliver on its goals. And the critical team that you need internally to be able to accomplish the mission and vision of the organization. How is Yahoo addressing this?
Okay, so what we have been doing is actually we work with a team of volunteers because we don't have the capacity in finances to be able to pay any experts to work with us on this. So we work with volunteers from different parts of the continent. And what we have done is make sure that our members are able to access resources of the Atlas network, through the Atlas Leadership Academy, to learn the knowledge and the skills that they need to help us deliver on the project.
And one more thing, regarding some of the challenges that you faced so far, can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, financial constraint is one of them. And also maybe you can find that somebody is really coming in and is interested to join the project, but they want to twist the mission of the organization before they can put in some finances or before they can help with some, bring in expertise. So 2 challenges: financial constraints, and then not having people who are really focused on your mission, on the mission of the organization coming in to help. But also we have just generally, challenges with internal structures, which we are working on right now. And also it is very tempting when you're such a young organization, because you find people who are also interested in working with you, who are not necessarily within the liberty movement, but maybe we are working towards similar goals. And so it becomes very difficult for you to decide whether, do I want to stick to my mission or I just want to join them? So there's the temptation of just doing everything, or sticking to the mission of the organization. So those are some of the challenges that we have.
Well, thank you very much for that. And we know that Frans has been able to, his budget currently, he funds it 90%, through self-generation. So he would have time to let us know how he's been able to do that. But Lanre, I wanted to come back to you to, figure out how you've been able to build your internal apparatus with Ominira to be able to meet to deliver on your objectives?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Denis. So what we have done, we are a small team, but what we have done at Ominira Initiative is to delegate tasks. There are certain things at the organization that I'm not the one directly doing that. My partner gets that done. So we know who is doing what, when, and who is responsible for certain things. So that has really helped. Given that we have 2 full-time and other part-time staff. So, but that's how we've built our internal structure to delegate tasks and responsibilities to different people. And that has helped us to check and balance each other and make the right decisions so far.
Now, in the African context, it tends to be very difficult, at least that's our experience in Nkafu, to find the team members with the right kind of skill set that you are looking for to accomplish a particular set of tasks. How is Ominira dealing with that issue of the skills?
Okay, so we've built. There are certain skills that are critical to our progress. So whenever we realize that we do not have certain skills, it's either one of the team members, we raise funds to train one of the team members, or sometimes we consult experts. We consult experts to okay, how do we do this? But basically what we've done so far is to, Stephen and I, my partner and I, have had to learn different things. I've had to learn different skills just so that we are competent enough to carry out the activities that we do.
Yeah, that is the startup mentality, right? You have to be able to figure out, a lot of the different skills. But before I come to Frans, I want to encourage, the folks we have online to please send Q&As, use the Q&A section to post questions. Frans, the IRI is funding 90% of its budget self-generated. You all have been able to figure out how to do that. And when you spoke earlier, you talked about the whole aspect of marketing communication, and the fact that even your staffing structure is changing, and you have there is an increase in the communication staff, and they need to be able to be out there to market the ideas of liberty, the ideas of free enterprise. Can you touch on 2 things? One, the whole issue of generating funds, self-generating funds as an institution, and secondly, the issue of communication and marketing, the product.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to that factory analogy that I made for you early on. That that's very important to instill that in your staff. People who work for think tanks can have slight delusions of grandeur, that it's a very kind of glamorous existence. But with us, it's not. And you need to produce products. But even before you get that, you need to understand, what is your purpose? What are you trying to achieve? I'd say that's number 1. Be very, very mission focused. Number 2, don't worry too much about money and the temptations it brings. The donor community is a treacherous place to be. It will try and wag the dog. The business funding for pro-liberty think tanks, equally treacherous territory to enter. Your interests and the interests of organized business communities are seldom going to be the same thing. You're a markets-friendly organization. You're not a business-friendly organization. So don't stress too much about your money at first. Understand what are you trying to achieve, and know that you've got one great asset, and that's your independence, because on that will hinge your credibility. And then within the limited resources you have, quality is very, very important. That every time a person engages with you, sees you, reads you, hears you, they think, that was worthwhile. So the next time they encounter you, they're going to seek you out, they're going to listen. Don't compromise the purpose and don't compromise the quality around questions of finance and the like. If you've got to remain small for longer, no problem with that at all. Once you've got those building blocks in place and you're thinking like a factory manager, look, our funding is innovative. It changes every couple of years. What we're doing in a few years' time is not going to be doing what we're doing now. But we're having brilliant success with the interface between tech, social media, and crowd financing. And that interface is allowing us to monetize content in a way we've never been able to do before. So we put a top flight pro-liberty content into the public domain, into the media, and we're able to use social media and the feedback we get from that, the leads we generate, to sign up supporters. And we didn't do that for much in the past 20 years. Now we're signing up large numbers of individuals who are contributing very modest amounts to the organization. It's an annuity income. You don't want once-off donations, because then you've got to go do that all over again. You want a regular monthly flow. And what you offer that individual, it's not a transactional relationship. We're not sending them a report or a book or something. We do that. Some of our divisions do that. But what we give them is the sense of joining something. These are people who are out there. They're frustrated. When you say something, it resonates with them. They say like, yeah, I believe that too. And you've got to create, there are lots of people like that out there in your communities, I have no doubt. What you need to learn to do is how can you create a channel for that person to give you, $1 a month, $2 a month. If you start to do that at scale, you've hit the jackpot on think tank funding, because you've got an annuity income. Your income is based on the quality of your information and its continued prominence in the public domain, and the prospects of donor dependency disappear. And I think think tanks globally, and that's going to work in emerging markets as well, I think this is going to be the model that distinguishes the top institutions from those that struggle, probably for at least the next 3 to 4 to 5 years. And it's that understanding. Well, look, we've always had a strong PR and marketing capacity, but we've brought in a lot of youngsters, kids, with I don't understand anything that they say, but they have amazing social media marketing skills. And that's how our staffing shifted. It's a winner. You can do it with limited resources. If I had one piece of advice for groups setting out, go for this now. If you pull it off, you're in a fantastic position.
That's amazing, Frans. I really appreciate that. And you've come back to reinforce, those two main things: be mission driven, stay on purpose. Your purpose should be crystal clear, and you should be focused on achieving the goals you set out, and don't allow mission creep to come in. Second thing is you got to prioritize quality. Quality every time. And lastly, which is very interesting, as you said, the issue of identifying within communities people who align with the ideas that you're trying to push, and get them to be part of this thing that is bigger than themselves. And I think that is really amazing. And Leon, I want to come to you to get your thoughts on, especially given the storied history of the Free Market Foundation. Could you use some examples to talk to us about how the Free Market Foundation dealt with certain stresses, in its 45 years, how it was able to overcome or maybe innovate, in trying to stay ahead of the curve?
Yes, we've had our stresses in the past, as I guess any long-lived organization has had. Probably our biggest was, 20 years ago or so, when we were technically insolvent and considered closing. Then more currently, we have similar stresses to what IRR is having, with some difficult members of our board and our council and people who criticize us from internally. This can be very ugly and take up a lot of time and be very, very unpleasant. So you want to surround yourself with a cooperative team if you can. And Frans is very good, if I may say, at leading the team and not being tolerant of people in his team who are not pulling in the same direction. Our problem has also been that we went from a period when the apartheid regime was very much against us, wanted to close us down. There was some pretty ugly incidents there. I was a member of what was called the Dakar Conference, which is when a group of white, mostly Afrikaans South Africans went and met with the anti-apartheid revolutionary movement, then the ANC, in Dakar in Senegal. And we were considered to have committed treason. There was some possibility that we would all be arrested and jailed. I don't think any of us minded that. We were living with that thing. That was one of the prices you have to pay if you take on an oppressive regime. And so that was a great stress for us, how we dealt with that. Very difficult indeed. And I must say, quite amazingly, the business community were very willing to fund anti-government, anti-apartheid activities. So more so even than now. Now the business community tends to be in the pocket of the current regime because they all want favors and they want contracts and they don't want to be victimized and they want licenses and permits. So in a strange way, getting the support of the business community is more difficult now than it was then. As Frans says, the interests of individual businesses are not the same as the interests of a policy institute like us. You know, we want economic freedom, we want liberty, personal liberty. That can often be very complicated. You know, for example, it's difficult for us to explain to people why we believe in the right of people to smoke. They say, but smoking is unhealthy, the government should clamp down on it. And we say, no, this is a very important lifestyle liberty issue. You know, as I like to say, I'm a lifelong non-smoker, by the way, and a teetotal, so I don't drink or smoke. But as I say, people are free to wave their fist around in the air, but not where my nose is. And they're free to blow smoke in the air, but not where my nose is. It's quite simple how these rights should work. So it can be quite complicated. It is now quite complicated. Our present government is increasing the regulation of the economy, is eroding civil liberties, separation of powers, the rule of law. And it means that people are scared and they don't want to take them on. We, unlike the IRR, don't have the luxury of being financially independent, so we have to raise money. And we do that, I might say, not unsuccessfully, but never to the scale we'd like. So I would also like to say that the principles matter, but what you do with them is quite important as libertarians and classical liberals. For example, I would like to see an abolition of the central bank. I don't think countries need central banks. They shouldn't exist at all. But if I go onto national television and say, abolish the central bank, people will think I'm a loony. So what do we do instead? We say, you know, maintain fiscal and monetary discipline and don't inflate the currency and behave sensibly. We don't actually go out and say, abolish the completely necessary thing, unnecessary thing. Why do people have currencies? Why do your countries have currencies? And the answer has nothing to do with economics. It's psychology. People feel like having a currency. So I always say a central bank should be run by psychologists, not bankers. Yes, so what we do sometimes is we have to moderate what we say according to what's saleable, what's practical, what are people willing to hear. So we have our philosophy. We debate extraordinarily fascinating philosophical concepts amongst ourselves. But to the outside world, we have to appear to be sensible, reasonable, people with our feet on the ground, recommending stuff that is saleable and tolerable, and that's how we have to adjust our message. Not compromise, never compromise. But for example, as I say, you go out and say, you know, I believe that everybody's mouth should be privatized. Now people think, what am I talking about? And I say, well, you and you alone should decide what you put in it. So drug laws and liquor laws and tobacco laws and so on all violate the right to your control over your mouth. However, if you go out and advocate legalization and decriminalization of the hardest and most dangerous drugs, you will be dismissed. So what you do instead is you talk about the right of people, for example, to purchase alcohol. That's saleable. That's most people can tolerate that. So always adjust the principles without compromising them to the political reality in which you operate.
Well, thank you very much, Leon, for that. Now, there are some younger organizations on the online here, and you've had success. I know Frans has touched about how you build an organization to be able to raise funds within and without depending on donor funding. But what advice, given your history and your expertise, what advice do you have for younger organizations regarding funding, regarding structuring for funding within the African landscape?
Well, I would say that for younger organizations without funding, and they can be very problematic, and we have been instrumental, by the way, to probably launching 10 or 12 other organizations, including organizations for informal traders, for people who live in rural villages, whatever, people doing microfinance, whatever. So quite often you have these organizations with no budget at all, effectively. What you can do is look for volunteers. There are any number of volunteers out there. There are people who share our philosophy, share our values. I see Linda Whetstone, the daughter of Anthony Fisher, who I mentioned earlier, is with us in this discussion as a guest. And, she knows very much about how organizations all over the world have had to deal with the lack of funding. And what you do is you get volunteers. What you do is you work hard yourself. But what you do is what Frans said is come up with something you can sell. What can you sell? Now, you can't sell ideas. If you go around saying, please pay me to tell you what freedom is, you won't find many customers. But what you can do is you can say, please pay me to help the government stop regulating your finances or regulating your operations or whatever. Now, the IRR, fortunately for it, doesn't have to do that. We do. But I would say what you do is, if you're a small organization, is look around you and say, who is currently a victim of government intervention and regulation? Can I go to them and offer them a service of combating it, of doing research, of doing writing, on going on national media and television and so on? So often you can get project finance. That is how I would advance poor people to start. Project finance. Take on the projects without compromising, but nonetheless they give you money. Then build it, build a base and crowdfunding, internet funding, membership drives, all of these normal things. But there's no simple answer. And then finally, for people in Africa and in poor countries around the world, of which of course there are many, is one of the things you can do is you can go and raise money internationally. So especially in the United States, especially in Germany, Britain, from these various international agencies, funds, foundations. So international funding for most institutes in Africa depend, when they are properly funded, on funding they've raised in other countries, especially the United States is a great source of funding for poor institutes. Now, how do you do that? It's very complicated. You have to have a 501c3 registration, which costs thousands of dollars, American dollars. Can't really be done. So what you have to find is a friendly organization, someone like Atlas, who can pass the money to you, and they have all the registrations, but you go and, for example, raise the money from an American donor or philanthropist, and then you get one of these institutes to get the money to your country for you at little or no cost. That's one way to get foreign funding in Africa and elsewhere, places like Bangladesh and Pakistan Indonesia and so on, where you have institutes like ours operating on shoestring budgets and depending entirely on international sources of funding.
Thank you very much, Leon. And I echo all your comments. And, you know, from us, even at Nkafu, we are dearly indebted to Atlas, as many other organizations here, for the work, the service, the help in funding and getting things going. So that is well received. Now we are rounding up. We have about 5 minutes to the end, and I would go one round for concluding remarks from the panelists. But if you still have a pressing question that you want to, it hasn't been asked, you can still submit your question, and we'll find a way to fit that in. But with that, I'll come to Belinder. Belinder, as we come to a close on this conversation, what is your one take and one advice, one piece of advice to folks who are thinking of starting, you know, organization, think tanks within the continent?
Number one, you have to know your audience. You want to start a project, who are you targeting? It's very important for you to understand your audience, because this is what is going to guide your messaging and even the programs that you're going to come up with. That's very important. Number two, if you're a young organization or you're just thinking of starting an organization, the social media is a very powerful tool which is available to all of us. For example, I live on Facebook and I used Facebook to channel traffic to the Yahoo Facebook page, because I knew that once I have a certain number of people on my Facebook page for the organization, then I can have a few of those people clicking to go to the website to see what we are up to. That's how we got people clicking on our website and sending emails. You want to do this together, like that. And then also partnerships. You don't have to do everything on your own. You can actually partner with organizations working towards similar missions. So for example, we have partnered with ARER to organize business forums in Kenya and Ghana. And also we have partnered with Enactors to also organize similar forums in Kenya and Ghana. So partnership is also very important. And number three, I would say it's important that you don't do everything. As much as it can be very tempting, like, you know, I want to be like Students for Liberty, I want to be like Nkafu, I want to be like FMF. You can't do everything. You have to decide whether you want to do advocacy, you want to do research, or, you know, or you just want to educate people. You have to like carve a niche for yourself. Once you have that focus, then you can be able to better yourself in terms of capacity building, and you'll also be able to concentrate on reaching out to the right people to help you with your mission. That's all I have to say.
Well, that's perfect. I mean, I really perfect. And you highlighted the fact that, as you say, as one says, collaboration is the new currency. There is absolutely no need to be afraid to collaborate, especially in this day and age. You got to collaborate. Lanre, let me get some closing thoughts from you.
Okay, so thank you. For anyone looking to start an organization, I like to say that you need to build competence, because you realize that there are opportunities, but if you're not competent, no one wants to put their money on you. And the other thing is to never go it alone. I've seen this African proverb that says, if you want to go far, you go together. And that's a thing in my own case, because I had someone that we're working together, we would understand how to help each other, and that has been helpful. So never go it alone, just as Belinder also said. And my one take from this is to never compromise quality. I took that from the other panelists.
Oh, thank you very much, Lanre. Frans?
Yeah, I think it's been said. I mean, the factory analogy is good. Independent, clear on what you're trying to achieve, who's the beneficiary, and the last thing, have you made it easy for people to fund you? I mean, your beneficiary is not going to get up all on their own, go to huge effort to approach you and ask you how to give you money. And we realized that we hadn't made it easy for people to support us. We've now made literally one-click channels, paperless debit order systems. And the money, I mean, it's not pouring in, but we're not doing badly. And ask yourselves that, how is your beneficiary meant to fund you? If it's a mystery or complicated or takes a lot of time, they're not going to give you any money. You can make it, use tech, you can make it super simple. And you'll be surprised at how many people will say to you, we've been waiting for you to do that because we love you and you're great. And we've always wanted to help you. We didn't know how to do so.
Wow, very, very strong. And thank you very much. Leon, some words, please.
Yes, my closing thoughts are not really going to be directly about institutes. So much has been said, and I'm honored to be with you, Denis, and these lovely panelists. So I'm going to speak about close with something slightly different. It's very easy in institutes, organizations, and in the liberty movement worldwide to become demotivated. I'm often surprised by my colleagues get very depressed when some new anti-liberty government policy is announced. I see around the world people lament that the world's losing freedom. And I want to actually say no. I think we need to look at the long haul of history. We in Africa, for example, live in a continent where 50 years ago, there was really only one democracy, and that was Botswana. And now we live in a world in which pretty much all countries in the world, at least on paper, are democracies. We live in a world where there is much more international freedom of trade, where we have been liberated by all sorts of technology. The world has moved in our direction. If you were an enemy of liberty now, you would have grounds for being depressed and demotivated. We as people fighting for liberty, I think, should be rejoicing and celebrating at the degree to which the world has shifted from an unfree world towards a free world by every independent objective measure. The time it takes to register business, the civil liberties, the rule of law, etc., etc., etc. There are probably about 100 indices that measure human well-being, and on all of them, human well-being has been increasing. So I would say, be optimistic, be excited, be proud. In fact, my view is that liberty has gained such ground on the planet that we should, all of us, organize an international victory celebration somewhere one day and say we have triumphed. And if you don't believe that, just read the literature of the enemies, of the fascists, of the communists, of the socialists, and you will see how miserable they are. They talk about the triumph of neoliberalism and capitalism and libertarianism. They are convinced that we have won and we are winning. And that's the only thing I agree with them about.
That's perfect. You know, this has been an absolutely phenomenal discussion, and really key take home has been, build competence, never compromise on quality, stay focused on your mission. And as I keep telling folks, your word is your bond. If you say you're going to do something, do that, and hold yourself accountable. I want to really thank the Atlas Network for organizing and planning this, for the very distinguished panelists that we've had, and a wonderful conversation so far. Thank you all very much, and we'll continue this forum online. Have a great day.